Hello and welcome to coverage of round 8 of the SRL Championship. This one in Austria at the Red Bull Ring, as you can see, and as you can also see, we have an interesting grid for this one. We've got the two Saubers on pole position. Etnik, who was last week's winner, of course, in France, and Hugo's his teammate just behind him. There was a huge gap between first and second in qualifying, half a second between Etnik and Hugo's, but then after that, 0.3 of a second between second and 13th. So a hugely competitive qualifying session for the Austrian Grand Prix. You can see Hugo's in that second Sauber, number 50 there, as they come into the left-hander in the second sector. Behind him, Speedy. Speedy didn't have a great week last week in France, but has bounced back again, qualifying third this time. And El Sergios just behind him in fourth. Again, beaten for the first time in 4 races last week in France, and qualifying down in fourth position for this one. Behind him, Anonymous in fifth, Copy sixth in the second Mercedes. Tomasho in the second Haas is seventh, and Michael in the Williams is 8th. Then a new face, Motocrosser 85 in the McLaren. He's going to start P9. And Triton, who was my co-commentator for the Monaco race, he's back in the Ferrari as per usual, and he qualifies on the back end of the top 10. All of the top 10 starting on ultra soft tyres, the rest of the grid starting on super softs, with the exception of Rivos, who is starting on the soft compound tyre. We're expecting a one-stop race here at the Red Bull Ring, and we are about to get underway. You can see the lights, 5 lights, and then when they go out, we will be go at the Red Bull Ring. Off we go. 2 Saubers get away well. Very good start from Speedy in third, looking for a little bit of space on the outside. Gets squeezed out there by Etnik as they go into turn 1, and just a little bit of contact between Etnik and his teammate allows Speedy to get alongside just momentarily, but then Sergios has got a little bit of momentum as well down as they go down towards turn 2. Sergios on the inside of Speedy, going to try and outbrake him. He does manage to outbrake him and gets that third position. Behind them, there's a lot of jostling for position towards the back of the grid. You can see for yourself there what's happening. It's tight, but everyone gets through cleanly as far as we can see. Jesse it was who got shuffled all the way to the back, but as far as we could see, no major incidents, and somebody runs very wide there. That's Sergios, who's lost 2 positions to Hugos and also to Anonymous. Didn't see what happened there at the hairpin, but Sergios has suffered from that start, and then side-by-side action ahead of them as well. Speedy going around the outside, or in fact he had that position already, fending off Hugos as they come towards the end of the first lap. Anonymous looking for a little bit of a gap. Hugos again looking to the inside, but not able to get it done, and Speedy runs very wide as they go through the penultimate corner. Big lead for Etnik though, who's got himself out to a really strong start in this one. That's a lead of about, what, a second and a half at the end of lap 1, as there's some penalties down the grid. Tomasho has retired. You can see his Haas in the background there. Didn't see what happened, but Slash LP is recovering, presumably minus a lot of his front wing. So a virtual safety car has been deployed as the leaders go into turn 2. A big crash towards the back of the grid. Tomasho, the unfortunate victim, and he is out of the race, unfortunately. You could see he lost his wheel in the background there. Didn't see how the accident happened, but certainly a disappointment for him. He started, what, 6th or 7th, something like that, towards the beginning of, or towards the front of the grid rather, as we see the leaders, as the safety car period comes to an end. We're back to green flag running. Etnik has a considerable lead over Speedy in P2, Hugos P3. We're going to ride on board here with Hugos in the Sauber, who's looking for a way around the Haas in front of him. Again, Speedy runs very wide in the penultimate corner. We do have strict corner cutting rules on, so that might come back to haunt him later in the race. DRS enabled for the start of lap 3 then. Hugos looks to the inside. Speedy covers off that particular move, and behind them, Sergios looking for a way around the Force India of Anonymous as well, as they all head up towards turn number 2 once again. And Did Hugos get the move done there? He did go down the inside, but then Speedy gets the cutback, and I think Hugos is going to be struggling to keep that third position because he lost a lot of momentum there. Anonymous right up behind him in the slipstream as they head down towards turn 5, and Sergios down the inside as well, locking a break as they go wheel to wheel. The two behind them for fourth place. Sergios looking around the outside of the left-hander. Anonymous is going to try and hold it on the inside, but Sergios gets the move done around the outside. Beautifully done from the Mercedes driver. And Sergios showing why he's the championship leader with moves like that as they head towards the end of the lap once again. Speedy's gotten a little bit of a gap as Hugos has to defend from Sergios. Going into the right-hander complex at the end of the lap. Just about manages to defend, but it's going to be a difficult one as he runs very wide. In fact, Hugos and Sergios gets that position. And Hugos just going backwards at the moment. I wonder if he's lost a bit of front wing because he seems to be really struggling out there, and again getting a huge dollop of opposite lock as he went around turn 1. Really struggling now. You can see Michael, who's got Motocrosser to his right. Oh, and a crash there as Motocrosser tags Hugos. Seemed to get away with it. Don't know if he lost any of his front wing, but it was a dive down the inside, which it looks like he might have gotten away with as they head into the hairpin. Hugos does leave the space and manages to stay ahead at least for now, but a really poor start for Hugos. A poor first few laps. That's been the story really of this this first 3 laps of this race. As Mac Jagley, and something happened behind there. Michael running off into the gravel. Didn't see what happened to him, but he was really struggling. As Mac Jagley gets himself into 6th place. He's the first of the super soft runners, so I wonder if his tyres are starting to come in. I wonder if that's what's propelled him up the order a little bit. Once again though, up front, Ethnic TRN with a considerable lead going into turn 2. Speedy about 3 seconds behind. Speedy trying to keep his championship hopes alive, and he's doing a good job of it so far. He's got Sergios, his main competitor, about 1.5 seconds behind him in that Mercedes. Then comes Anonymous, who's I think looking for a way past the Mercedes, but going to be very difficult. Doesn't really have any sort of a tyre advantage. As they head through the double left-hander once again. Anonymous behind, and we can see Mac Jagley making his way up through the order. He's going to have DRS on Hugos as well here. And I just wonder if Hugos is suffering with a little bit of damage. He's got 1.5 seconds now in front to Anonymous. You can see him really struggling with the back end of that car as they went through the last couple of corners. Mac Jagley now going to have quite a run as they head up towards turn 1. You see he's got DRS open as Jesse gets the first penalty of the race, at least first corner cutting penalty of the race. Mac gets it slowed down for turn 2. And Sergios now running down towards the hairpin at the other end of the lap. Got Anonymous trailing him. But you can see the gap that Mac Jagley has been able to close on Hugos. Hugos, of course, qualifying on the front row of the grid. He is considerably faster, one would assume, in terms of pace than Mac Jagley, but Mac with the better of the tyres right now, and possibly the better of the damage situation as well. We don't know, but it may be that Hugos has some damage. As again, we're going to see plenty of those penalties. We do have strict corner cutting on in this race, so a lot of people I'm sure are going to fall foul of that. That's the first significant one though. Speedy in turn 1 falling foul of the stewards once again, and he has the first meaningful, well, first 3-second penalty at the front of the grid at least. So once again, Mac closes right up to the back of the Sauber in front of him. Hugos again struggling to get on the power. Mac in the slipstream now. He's going to have a run as they head down towards the hairpin. Hugos covers the inside. Mac trying to go around the outside and just getting squeezed out a little bit there. Good defending from Hugos, now Motocrosser as well. As a watching brief in that McLaren, just behind the two of them. Oh, and off they go! And into the wall, and out of the race is Hugos. Oh, no. Well, we saw exactly what happened there. They hooked wheels, I think. Mac Jagley's right front on Hugos' left rear. And Hugos speared into the wall. Mac surely has damage. He's going to have to pit, I would imagine. He does. But what a disaster for Hugos. Qualified on the front row. And that's a penalty for Mac Jagley, I'm afraid. Didn't get that slowed down in time. But my goodness. That was a dramatic accident as Triton goes up the inside of Motocrosser for that 5th position. They've both inherited that 5th position, 5th and 6th places now. After that accident, Mac Jagley putting the Ultras on and presumably getting a new front wing as well. After that crash, Hugos not quite so lucky and is out of the race, unfortunately, after an extremely good start. Brutal gets himself 3 seconds. He's running towards the back of the grid in this one. As we see the leaders once again, Etnik getting a huge lead. Just driving that Sauber so beautifully. They come to start lap 9. We would expect the first pit stops to be very soon. The first scheduled pit stops, that is, to be very soon. So we see Speedy as well, getting a little bit sideways on the exit of turn 1. But no problems there. Had a couple of other people pit as well. Wimpy in the Toro Rosso. This is Wimpy's debut in SRL. And he's put the soft tyres on already. So running at the back of the field, but he has done a pit stop, so he'll have an advantage over the cars directly in front of him. Back to the front. And Speedy got about a second and a half over El Sergios. That gap has stayed pretty consistently at a second and a half for the last 3 or 4 laps, as Jippo gets himself another penalty as well. He gets himself, I think, his first penalty. So we'll see which of the leaders decide to come into the pits first. It's Speedy, in fact, as he almost loses it on the outside there, but does come into the pit lane. So Sergios now P2. None of the other front runners, as far as we can see, pitting. Motocrosser decides to come in the McLaren. So he is another one. I'm going to see Speedy come out of the pits. He's going to put the super soft tyres on, so I would suspect that is a 2-stopper for Speedy. It's not a huge penalty here coming into the pits in the way it is in France, for example. So 2-stopper could be viable. Probably is slightly slower overall than the 1-stopper, but not by much. I think we're going to see Speedy overtake Rivos here, although Rivos has DRS as well, so it's going to be the slipstream for Speedy as he goes down the inside, or looks down the inside at least. Rivos able to cover that off at least for the time being, and this is important for Speedy. He needs to get past this Force India because Rivos has got tyres on that he's had on since the beginning of the race. They're also the slower soft compound tyres, so Speedy really needs to make this move fairly soon. He's got Motocrosser about 8 seconds behind him as Speedy goes through the last couple of corners. Rivos also, of course, has DRS from the car that's in front of him. That's Ocean Chief. In fact, Rivos is going to be having a look at Ocean Chief here. Rivos down the inside into turn 1, and Speedy goes into the back of Ocean Chief, I think. No harm done by the looks of it. Rivos gets a poor run out there, and Speedy going to have to contend with this Renault as well. I think he has done it finally. So Speedy does manage to negotiate the 2 cars that were battling, and continue to battle, in fact, behind him. Rivos gives Ocean Chief the position. Does have DRS, but doesn't have enough space to... doesn't have enough straight left, rather, to pull alongside. So Ocean Chief will get that 8th position just for now. In front of them, there's a battle going on for 5th place here. Copy and Michael. Mercedes versus Williams. We know who would win that one in real life, but this isn't real life. This is F1 2018, where all of the cars are equal. Michael now very close as they head up towards turn 1. Does have the DRS and the slipstream, of course. And, oh, a poor run out there from Copy. Was that a screen freeze as well? It might have been a screen freeze from Michael. Michael dips back into the slipstream, looking like he's going to pull out to the left-hand side. He does so. They're side-by-side into turn 2. Copy just about holds the inside. Michael, though, cuts back to the inside once again, and I think he's going to get this move done with DRS. So they head down the hill towards the hairpin, and indeed he does. So Michael gets himself up into P5. And we see another swap of position between Rivos and Ocean Chief. Rivos really struggling on the outside there. Ocean Chief, I think, is going to get that place back. They head into the double left-hander. So 1/3 of the way through this race already as Wimpy gets himself his first 3-second penalty. Running in P16. And into the pits come all 3 of our leaders. So Epnik is going to put the soft tyres on. So I think is Sergios. We see Yatnik leave the pits. Sergios coming out as well. So Speedy looks like he's gotten a little bit of a gap now. Copy behind him is on older tyres. Sergios, of course, has just pitted. So a little bit of clear air for Sergios at least. But a 5-second gap to make up to Speedy. But he's got those soft tyres on, and you would suspect that that's going to be him on those soft tyres until the end of the race. Up front, Triton having his moment in the spotlight. He's in the lead, but only because he hasn't pitted yet. He's probably going to be coming in, I would imagine, at the end of this lap. But for now, that Ferrari leads. Into the pits he comes. And we'll see where he comes out in just a second as once again Etnik has a pretty considerable lead. Well, it's not actually not that big a lead. He's benefited from the undercut there, Speedy. He's only a 1.5 seconds behind now. He's into turn 1 they go. So Triton's going to come out. I think he's going to come out behind this little battle between Anonymous and Motocrosser for P7. Or P6 rather. Oh, and into the wall on the exit. Did he get away with that? I wonder if he got away with that. Didn't see anything fly off the car, so he might have gotten away with it. But you really don't want to do that in Austria. The pit lane entry, or the pit lane exit rather, is quite a bit more forgiving than it was in last year's iteration of the game. But still not something you ever want to do, because just after you've pitted is really not a good time to be damaging your front wing. So 5 seconds now, the gap between Speedy and Sergios. And Speedy's going to have to make that an awful lot bigger if he wants to keep that second place. Of course, Speedy will have to come into the pits once again. He's got Etnik in front of him. They'll probably be on a similar sort of pace given the tyre situation. Etnik is on the slower soft tyres, but does have tyres that are slightly new or newer than Speedy's. Still yet to pit behind them, Ocean Chief and Rivos contesting 4th position. It's not really 4th position because the fast boys are coming through on their new tyres. One of them is Anonymous, who dispatches of his teammate pretty comfortably into turn 2. Another of them is Motocrosser, who I think is likely to follow suit very soon on Rivos, who's on those very old softs. Gonna look a little bit further down. Mac Jagley has to pit once again, of course, because he put those ultra soft tyres on after his incident. It's all the way back on lap 5 or thereabouts. Had that incident with Hugo's that led to Hugo's retiring from a front row start in this race. They both speared into the wall. So he is probably the main source of action on this track right now. Anonymous on those new tyres against Ocean Chief, who's on those 15-lap-old super soft tyres. Imagine he'll be pitting within the next few laps. And down the inside goes Anonymous. Again, Ocean Chief deciding not to contest that one. Pretty sensible. Not really in the same race as Anonymous. On completely different strategies. They head down towards the hairpin. Really good shot. Oh, and behind him, Motocross just got a little bit antsy on the brakes there. Was forced off the track to avoid the Force India just ahead of him. And is able to recover, but only after losing a little bit of time. And Rivos again. Rivos struggling with those very old soft tyres now. As Ocean... I think Ocean, is that signalling an intent to pit from Ocean Chief? It looks like it is, so he does pit. Rivos decides not to pit. And so Ocean pits from what had become P5 at that point. Oh, he gets himself a penalty as well. He's the second Renault to get himself a penalty. Mac Jagley got one as well. Not able to stop in time. As Motocrosser gets himself a penalty. So let's look at the situation back at the front again. Speedy managing to hold that gap to Etnik, but not really able to close it in that Haas. Of course, he does have those 3 seconds to be added onto his race time as well because of the penalty that he got a little bit earlier on in the race. We'll keep an eye out, of course, for further penalties for the front runners. At the moment, we don't think there are any, other than Speedy's 3 seconds. So Triton now on those new soft tyres, chasing down Rivos as well. Rivos, of course, on those old soft tyres. So this should be pretty easy for Triton to make a move stick at some point. Ocean, by the way, rejoining in P10. So work for him to do on those fresh soft tyres if he wants to get some good points, as Rivos goes a little bit wide, and I think that will open the door for Triton to come alongside and in fact to be past the Force India before they get to the hairpin at the top of the hill. Motocrosser just about able to stay in touch behind. Of course, he had that incident, cost him a few seconds at that corner exactly a lap ago. Able to keep it on this time. And now back at the front. The gap's starting to open again between Etnik and Speedy, as you probably would expect. Etnik's got much greater longevity on those tyres. We assume Etnik is going to be going till the end of the race. Speedy going to have to pit again. I think for another set of either supers or ultras. The race has settled down just a little bit. Let's look a little bit further down then. This is battle for P12. Motocrosser gets himself another penalty. I think that's his second. Radios/LP and Mac Jagley recovering from that unfortunate incident with Hugos earlier on in the race. He's trying to salvage whatever he can from the situation. Again, just looking back up front, Speedy now definitely falling off the back of Etnik TRN in that Sauber as Radios. But we saw why he got that penalty, run wide on the exit of turn 1. And that'll be another 3 seconds for him. /LP has a look down the inside. In fact, will go down the inside. Oh, and Mac Jagley just about follows through as well. Oh, and then an accident. Oh, dear. Didn't see what happened to /LP. Oh, Speedy gets himself another penalty, so that's 6 seconds for Speedy. But again, so Mac Jagley gets himself those 2 places and can now set off after flying Jippo in the Red Bull, who qualified last of all. Meanwhile, Rivos keeps on keeping on those soft tyres. Lap 20 now, we're just past half distance of this 36 lap race. Motocrosser down the inside into turn 2. Makes that look very easy indeed, and he can now set off once again after Triton, who he's been running with for most of the race. Further forward, Sergios is actually not really gaining on Speedy. Etnik looks like he's got the pace on everyone, as we saw in qualifying, and we've seen in the first half of this race. He looks the class of the field today. Half a second faster than everyone in qualifying, and quite considerably faster than everyone in the race as well. This is Sergios running in P3. We don't know when Speedy's going to pit. I would assume that it'll be within the next 3 or 4 laps. So he'll come out probably somewhere around where Rivos was, behind Motocross or something like that, in what would be P6, as Rivos does finally pit and put on those super soft tyres. Further down the field, Motocrosser trying his best to close in on Triton. We're right on board with the McLaren for a little bit. So he's just tantalisingly about 1.2 seconds away from the McLaren at the moment. Not quite in DRS range, but just a little bit more and he will be. As we see Triton coming up to lap Wimpy in the Toro Rosso. He's managed to keep it on track. It's a good effort for his first race. And Wimpy does the decent thing. Well, I thought he was going to... Yeah, he is going to let him past. Just lets him go on the outside. Well, lets them both go on the outside, so good courteous driving from the South African. Back on board with Motocrosser just for a second. You can see now he is well and truly in DRS range of the Ferrari in front of him. So we'll keep our eyes on this battle for a little bit. The gap at the front's gone up to 5 seconds now. Sergios is close to within 4 seconds of Speedy. 9 seconds behind Sergios is Anonymous. And then these two, another 6 seconds back from Anonymous. Coming to the final couple of corners, he's well positioned to get a very good run. That was Triton for cutting the penultimate corner there. Gets himself 3 seconds. So that could well be significant come towards the end of the race. So again, through turn 1. Gotta be so careful here not to get yourself any of those warnings, because those 3 seconds add up. Speedy, I'm sure, is going to find out. He's got 6 seconds already. Down the inside goes Motocrosser then into the hairpin for P5. And it looks as though he's going to pull away, at least for the time being. He has seemed to have a pace advantage. He's had a couple of those incidents, though, Motocrosser, which has meant that he hasn't quite been able to unlock the pace in that McLaren, but it does seem like it's there. And already almost out of DRS range is Motocrosser now. On older tyres as well. Yellow's in Sector 2. Not exactly sure why. As Anonymous gets himself 3 seconds, that could be significant as well. Not exactly sure what the penalty situation is between Motocrosser and Triton. I think Motocrosser has a couple though. So it might be that Triton is actually still ahead. On paper at least, if not on the track. Rivos closing up now on Ocean Chief. Of course, he's got those faster tyres on. And they are newer tyres as well. So I think this is going to be a battle for P9 very shortly indeed. Rivos, you would expect to be faster. These two have been running together for most of the race. Jesse gets himself another penalty. Having a little bit of a struggle in that second McLaren. Right at the back of the field at the moment. Speedy pits from P2. So he's going to put the Ultras on for the final stint. 11 laps on the Ultras. That's quite an ask of Speedy there. In fact, 12 laps on the Ultras. As he goes around turn 1, he comes out behind Anonymous but ahead of Motocrosser. So now he's got 12 laps to... Well, I assume he will pass Anonymous, but he's also got to catch Sergios as well if he wants that second place and if he wants to make any inroads into the championship at all. And of course he's got those 2 penalties as well to make up. As I think we missed Rivos passing Ocean Chief as expected. Indeed we did. Rivos goes defensive into the hairpin at turn 2. Ocean tried to squeeze a little bit there but didn't have the grip to do that. And Rivos manages to keep that position. So we'll follow the progress of Speedy. We've seen Speedy a couple of times on an alternate strategy from the others, and he certainly is in this race. Nobody else out of the top, well, 10 drivers at least, deciding to go for the 2-stop, but Speedy deciding he can make it work as he goes into turn 1. 1.6 is the gap between him and Anonymous at the start of this lap. It's going to come down, I would imagine, to almost nothing as they come towards the end of this lap. Definitely a slower race, this one, isn't it? Not quite as action-packed as France was last week, but still engaging. Speedy coming up to the back of Anonymous. There's a lapped car in the way as well. Not quite sure who that is. It might be Slash LP by the looks of it. Might be a Ferrari. As we see Speedy coming up towards the last couple of corners, gaining very visibly now on Anonymous, and he's going to have a perfect DRS slingshot. He does hit the back of the Force India there just a little bit, and again as they go over the start-finish line. But he manages to get the move done very easily as they head into turn 1. Triton gets himself another penalty. That could be very significant. He's running around a few cars there, and in fact I think he's going to drop behind Michael with that one. I haven't seen a penalty for Michael yet in P7. Haven't talked much about the Williams driver, but he's had a pretty solid race, I would say. He's kept it consistent and stayed out of trouble for as far as we've seen at least. Rivos gets himself another 3 seconds, so that's a lot of penalties now for Rivos. I think that's at least 9 and possibly 12. So 10 laps to go. In fact, 9 laps to go now. Etnik crosses the start-finish line, 9 seconds ahead of Sergios. I think Etnik's going to win the race pretty comfortably by the looks of it. Not quite the nail-biter that last week was. The question is whether Speedy can make any inroads into that gap for second place. And although he will be faster, Speedy sets the fastest lap of the race, 1 minute 6.751. But even though he's faster, I have a hard time seeing him make up those 11 seconds and then another 6 as well to actually give him the position against El Sergios. Here is Triton then into the hairpin. He's got Motocrosser in front of him. I think that's the other McLaren of Jesse that he's coming up to lap. Possibly for the second time. In fact, definitely for the second time. As Mac Jagley gets himself a penalty. That's the other story in this race, whether Mac Jagley can get himself up all the way from where he was down in 15th or 16th after the incident with Hugos that knocked Hugos out of the race. Whether Mac Jagley can get himself up and pass his fellow Renault driver for that 10th position. 10.5 seconds is the gap between Speedy and El Sergios. And I would suggest that is not going to be overhauled in these last 7 laps or so. Sergios looks like he has this second place in the bag. Not exactly sure how many penalties Anonymous has. I'm not sure he has any. So Speedy might need that 6-second gap on Anonymous. I think he probably will get it. But third place might be the best he can do in this particular race. Everyone's sort of settled down now into their own little rhythm. It's the fastest lap of the race. I missed who that was. Oh, I wish this was easier to navigate. Jippo with the fastest lap of the race, 106.5. So again, he's got those fresh ultra soft tyres on. So what's the gap now? 4.5 between himself and Anonymous. So those tyres will start to fall off at some point for Speedy. And we know Speedy in the past has struggled a little bit with tyre management. And he's on the 2-stop today, so it's not a huge concern for him, but he's still asking those ultra soft tyres to go 12 laps. And a lot of drivers did that at the start of the race. It was lap, 10, 11 that the leaders came in for those ultra soft tyres to be changed, and of course they've done qualifying as well, so maybe 12 laps is okay, but certainly it's not going to be all that comfortable, as Anonymous does manage to get around the Ferrari of /LP pretty easily. It was good driving from the Ferrari man just to move aside, and in fact he comes into the pit lane to change tyres once again. Again, looking for battles on this racetrack and not really finding any, to be completely honest. The race looks like it's heading to a pretty quiet conclusion. Oh, as Triton tries to get around the lapped car. And not quite sure what he was doing. I think he was going in for a bite of slipstream there on the McLaren as the McLaren was trying to let him past. So maybe not the most sensible thing to be doing. Just move out of the way and get past safely rather than try and get a few extra hundredths of a second from the slipstream. And he runs wide there as well on the exit of the hairpin. He's got Michael about 1.5 seconds behind. He's going to be a very interested spectator there with that, as Jesse follows the Ferrari through the complex. Michael is going to have DRS here as well, so we'll stay on board with the Williams for at least a little bit. Jesse, I assume, is going to move out of the way, and he does. There you go. That's how you pass a McLaren that's letting you through off the racing line. Might have got a warning for that, Michael. He's pushing very hard. And Triton lets him through. Interesting decision from the Ferrari. Not exactly sure why he would do that. Maybe just wants to be behind. Would rather have the DRS. Maybe he took damage there. And then he's struggling to keep the front of the car pointing in the right direction. What are those yellows for? I'm looking at the gaps and I can't see anything. So Michael inherits 6th place now in this race, as we see further up the grid. Speedy on what is now a forlorn chase, a very lonely chase for that 2nd place. He's not going to get the 2nd place, though. He's going to get the 3rd place, which is going to be good points for him. But for a long while in this race, it looked like a real opportunity to eat into the lead of El Sergios at the top of the championship. But no such luck, unfortunately. He's had to settle here for what will be a podium, but Only the third step of the podium, unfortunately for him. Triton has fallen a long way off the back of Michael, so I wonder if he does have damage on that Ferrari. We'll see if we can see anything on the front wing. It's so difficult to see damage though. I honestly can't tell whether he has damage or not. But he's struggling even to stay ahead of Jesse, so I would assume that must mean he has some sort of damage. Although Jesse's on the super soft, so it might be that Jesse's just actually as fast. Much newer super softs as well. So a debut P5 by the looks of it for motocrosser, who's had an eventful race, but he's had good pace all the way through. He qualified very well, and he's had really good pace for most of this race. And he's going to get his reward with 10 championship points. And certainly I think a few people will have taken notice. Anonymous, with yet another very solid drive in the Force India, is going to get himself P4. It's just been a really solid race for him. He qualified pretty well, was just behind the leaders for most of the race. He inherited that 4th place when he passed Hugos, of course, in those first few laps. And he's going to pick up that 4th position. But up front, it's this man all the way through, Etnik TRN. We've seen him be battling right at the front pretty much since he joined the league. Very, very fast indeed. And has certainly been the class of the field today. Really, really impressive performance. Got himself on pole by, I think it was over half a second. Certainly about half a second, which on a track like Austria, which is only a 63-second lap anyway, 64-second lap, is very, very impressive. And he's driven an absolutely commanding race. He ran away at the start. He pitted, went on to the one-stop strategy that everyone else is on, and has just controlled the race from the front. Sergios likewise had a slightly difficult first few laps, but once he got established in that 3rd place, which became 2nd place when Speedy pitted early for his first stop and then pitted again for a 2nd time. He never really looked back and never really looked under any sort of threat either. Speedy with another penalty. I think that's only 9 seconds though, so I think he will stay ahead of Anonymous, who is 12 seconds behind him on the road. Copy as well is coming up to the back of Triton. And Triton's fallen way off the back of Michael. In fact, that's Jesse's McLaren in front, so Jesse's McLaren has passed Triton and has gone up the racetrack. Looks like it's a real struggle for him to slow down, so I'm going to assume that he does have some sort of front wing damage. Etnik TRM wins though. Commanding performance from the Sauber driver. Very impressive as Sergios drives into the wall as he crosses the line in P2. Speedy comes over the line. It's been a struggle for him. He drives into the wall as well. Finishes P3. Anonymous in that Force India. Got cause to be pleased, I think, with a 4th place finish. He crosses the line. Only 3.8 behind Speedy in the end. Speedy with those 9 seconds of penalties. As motocrosser crosses the line. And in fact, Michael, who was about a 1.5 seconds behind him on the road, does manage to jump him with penalties. And Copy jumps Triton as well, so lots of penalties for Triton. He falls all the way down to P8. Rivos, of course, was P9 on the road, but is in fact P10, because Ocean Chief didn't have, I don't think, any penalties in this race, whereas Rivos had quite a few. So that's going to be the finishing order then. Etnik, of course, wins the race. Sergio 2nd, Speedy P3 in that Haas. And, well, 2 in a row now for Etnik. We had 4 in a row for Sergios earlier in the season. Now we've got 2 in a row for Etnik TRN. A great performance from him. And he will be right in the championship picture after that win too. There we see a rundown of the results then. A rundown of all of the penalties. And Etnik with the win on what started a very good day for Sauber. It ended a good day for Sauber because Hugos, as you can see there, who started alongside him on the front row, well, he and Mac Jagley had a disagreement on lap 6, and that led to his demise at the end of the race. A point in the end as well for Mac Jagley, who only had the 1 penalty, but Rivos, of course, had 5 for 15 seconds, so Mac Jagley able to beat the Force India driver by 5 seconds on the score sheet. So that's the end of the race then. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next week for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone.